Okay.
Okay, with Sukkot approaching, Sukkot, the second day, Chalamoid Sukkot, was my father's yard site, is my father's yard site. I want to talk, which actually be next Sunday also. We'll see what the terms of when we could arrange this year next Sunday. But in any case, I just wanted to mention over, I probably have said it in the past, a thought of my father's regarding Sukkot and then my own shot. But part of the reason why I want to mention it is that I think that the thought that my father expressed has special relevance in view of the situation that we are encountering today. And now, my father was always intrigued, and this was a thought that he repeated many times about Sukkot. He was intrigued by the fact that Sukkot is like a combination of two holidays. On one hand, we have the mitzvah of Sukkah. On the other hand, we have the lulav and esrog. And the mitzvah of Sukkah, we all know what it symbolizes. Lulav and esrog, my father's feeling was that it represented to a certain degree the Chag Asif, the harvesting season that Sukkot commemorates. So on one hand, we have the holiday of Sukkot, where the Jew goes into the Sukkah, lives in the Sukkah for 7 days. On the other hand, on the same very days, he takes the lulav and esrog, which my father felt was symbolic of the Chag Asif, of the harvest season that Sukkot commemorated. And it seems like there was no relationship between the ideas represented by Sukkah and the idea represented by the lulav and esrog. And my father would say, he says, take a look at Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, in Parshas Chayesara, but when he talks to the Bnei Ches, he talks to the Bnei Ches. He said, "Ger v'toshav anochi imachem." I am a ger and a toshav. What is the difference between a ger and a toshav? A ger is an immigrant, someone who joins the Jewish people. To a certain degree, he is an immigrant. Of course, to join the Jewish people, you have to have commitment to the Torah, commitment to the Jewish people, commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But a ger doesn't have real roots. An immigrant doesn't have real roots in the land that he immigrated to. On the other hand, Avram Avinu said he was a toshav. He was a resident. After all, he was in the land many, many years. He occupied a position of prominence. Leaders of the different nations would very often come to meet with him, to give him honor, to join him in his celebrations. And as we see, the Bnei Ches said to him, Nisi Elokim Ata B'Sochenu, a prince of God, you are in our midst. The way Chazal explained the pasuk, he said, I'm a ger. I come from a foreign country. I have no family plots here. On the other hand, I'm a toshav, I'm a resident, because God promised this land, gave this land to me to give to my ancestors. But my father added that every person is both a ger and a toshav. My father very often, and my father would point out that the word ger comes from the word gargir. I think he quoted it in the name of Ibn Ezra. The word ger comes from the word gargir, a seed. A seed is something that doesn't have roots, and it's very easily drifts with the wind. A toshav, on the other hand, is a person who has roots in the land. And my father said that every human being, in a sense, could express the same thought that Avraham Avinu expressed. It manifests itself in different ways. But every human being is a ger. You could be the biggest toshav there is. You could have the greatest security that there is. My father in those days, this tells you how long ago I heard it, he would give the example of John Kennedy. John Kennedy, who had more security than John Kennedy? And in those days, the Secret Service apparently really did its job. And nevertheless, one person, a drifter, took a rifle and went to an upper floor and killed him. There was no greater toshav than John Kennedy at that time. But even the greatest toshav is also a ger, doesn't have roots, is insecure, should be insecure. And of course, when it comes to a toshav, it varies the degree of a toshav that a person is. But even the greatest toshav is also a ger. Now, and to a certain degree, we see, this my father didn't mention, but it's clear in the Rishonim, in Parshas Vayeshev. And it's perhaps important to point out that the three regalim, my father didn't mention that, but the three regalim, the Zohar says, that the three regalim correspond with the three Avos. Pesach conforms with Avraham Avinu, is identified with Avraham Avinu. Goy Mikarev Goy separated himself from the nations. And then Yitzchak is Shavuos. And Zohar mentions Psukim. But I think the idea of the Akedah, the fact that he was tied to the Mizbeach, is symbolic of the Nasev and Ishma. And the idea of being on top of the carbon, giving oneself over to God, that's also the Nasev and Ishma. And Yaakov Avinu is Sukkos. The Zohar says because of the pasuk U'mikneu also Sukkos, Vayikra Shem Hamakom Sukkos. Okay, that needs to be explained. It's not what I'm focusing on now. But Yaakov Avinu was a man who was identified with drifting from place to place. And when I say from place to place, I'm talking not just inside Eretz Yisrael, as Abraham and as Yitzchak, but Yaakov drifted from place to place. Yaakov had to go to Lavan. Yaakov had to go down to Mitzrayim. And along the ways, he encountered all kinds of situations. So Yaakov is identified as the traveler, the other Avos. Once they became Avos of Klal Yisrael, did not really leave Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu, he had to go down to Egypt. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him that he was going to die in Egypt. So also, Yaakov Avinu, in a sense, didn't have roots. Matter of fact, it says, Vayeshiv Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv. Yaakov resided in the place where his father was a ger, someone Mefarshim. Megurei comes from the word ger. Yitzchak, even though he was in Eretz Yisrael, but there was a realization that every person, and certainly a Jew at that time in Eretz Yisrael, was a ger, didn't have roots, was insecure, had to always be on guard, even in Eretz Yisrael. But Yaakov, Vayeshiv Yaakov Eretz Megurei Aviv. Yaakov, as Chazal tell us, Bikesh Leishe B'Shalva. He wanted to be at peace. He didn't want to be a ger. He wanted to have roots. He felt now that he went through everything with Lavan and with Esav. Finally, he returned to Eretz Yisrael. He finally will have roots. And Kafzala Rob Social Yosef, the whole situation of Yosef jumped upon him. And as the Medrash says, Lo Dailat Tzadikim, that they're going to have roots in Olam Haba, in the world to come. But they seek roots in this world. In other words, even in this world, even for the Avos in Eretz Yisrael, the land that was given over to them for all generations, they didn't have roots. In Yemos HaMashiach, perhaps, there will be roots for the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. But until Mashiach comes, it does not appear that there'll be roots for the Jewish people. Jewish people have to always be on guard. And this is the problem. with these peace now movements. I understand. I understand the reasons, the psychological reasons for this movement. We're tired. To a sense, as the Torah tells us about Klal Yisrael, that they're going in the desert. How much more do we have to deal with? And we think that the more we give in, the greater the chance that we'll finally be able to be addressed. But the answer is we can't be addressed. The answer is that we always have to be on guard. Because we're certainly at that time, and certainly in our time, even though we're Toshavim in Eretz Yisrael, we are residents of Eretz Yisrael. Even though Eretz Yisrael belongs to us, but at the same time, we have to be on guard. We're not secure. We are Gerim also. And that was the lesson of Kavtzol of Ronso Shel Yosef. And sometimes the insecurity manifests itself in outsiders. Sometimes the insecurity manifests itself in things that are done by people that are from among us. But we always have to be on guard. We can't relax. We have to be on guard. And in a sense, as a matter of fact, I always mention my grandfather's thoughts. I heard from my father in the name of my grandfather. Bakei Shalom B'Radfehu, which everybody translates. Search for peace and run after it. My grandfather explained it. Bakei Shalom, search out the peace and then run after it. Because people hear the word peace. Oh, we're there already. We'll be a toshav. We have nothing to worry. Just give in. And we see time and time again, every time we gave in, every time there was a so-called peace treaty, there was one problem after another. So, Bakei Shalom B'Radfehu, peace has to be investigated because irregardless of our situation, we are Gerim. We are insecure. And my father said that the sukkah, that represents the insecurity of the Jew. And to a certain degree, also the insecurity of the non-Jews. As a matter of fact, Chazal tell us that the Umos Holam complained to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he gave the Jewish people mitzvos. He didn't give them mitzvos. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'll give you one mitzvah kala, an easy mitzvah. And that's the mitzvah of sukkah. And then when the weather conditions, I know the question, the Teshu came to Duru. It's again, so they were boet. They went out and they were boet. They kicked the sukkah. They no longer wanted the mitzvah of sukkah. And the Torah tells, the Navi tells us, Zos tehei chatas Mitzrayim, this is the sin of the Egyptians, that they didn't observe, and all the nations, that they didn't observe the mitzvah of Sukkah. What is it? The nations of the world, they don't want insecurity. They're not ready to deal with insecurity. They only want the Chag HaOsif. They only want security, economic security. They didn't observe Chag Sukkos, but what they like to observe is the Chag HaOsif. That's what they want to observe. But that'll be the Chatas Mitzrayim and Chatos of all the nations that did not observe the Chag Sukkos, because you can't have security with insecurity. You can't have toshav, being a resident, without being a ger. And the Torah tells us, Kol ha'ezrach, my father would say, Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu basukos. Ezrach is a citizen. It's a person of security. Although today it seems that sometimes the immigrants have more security than the citizens, but that's a change in the derech hateva. So so kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yesh b'sukkos. You who think you're an ezrach, go sit in the sukkah. In other words, you should know that you are insecure also. We are insecure, not you, but we. We are insecure. We have to learn what it means to be insecure. The sukkah is open to nature. The schach is open. Sukkah represents the insecurity of the Jew. And to a certain degree, the insecurity of the nations of the world who don't want to observe Chag HaSukkos, who only want to observe the Chag HaOsif. They want security, but they don't fail to recognize that security comes with the price of insecurity. And to a certain degree, we have that problem also today. Minhag haYehudim afilu hatov shebehem keminhag hagoyim asher b'sochem hem yoshvim. And this is a much smaller world today. We're all, wherever we live, you can live in Bnei Brak, you can live in Lakewood, wherever you live. It's a much smaller world today. We have this attitude. We have the same attitude to a large degree of the non-Jews, and we're influenced by them. And because of that, they talk about peace, peace, peace. But there is no peace. It's a dream. And what unfortunately happens, that when people think that their dreams are reality, the dreams turn into nightmares. And to a certain degree, that's what happened on October 7th. People were not on guard. These were people, many of them, were people who were advocates and not finding fault in anybody, chas v'shalom. Advocates of peace. And they thought we could get along without any guarantees. And we gave access to those associated with our enemies. And it was a well-planned operation. And we weren't on guard. They thought that we could be at peace when there were no guarantees, when there was no searching out the peace. There was only searching for peace. The Chag Osif, on the contrary, that represents the Chag Osif represents the security, economic security. And I want to mention to a certain degree, many of those, I think, who do not have a positive attitude about the soldiers. Now, I understand why I'm not, again, I could give a share about it, but I'm not talking now from the perspective of halacha. I'm talking just what would be a general impression. I'm not talking about the question of whether yeshiva boys should serve in the army, shouldn't serve in the army, should be drafted, should not be drafted. It's a separate question. I understand, though, why many in the Haredi community are scared of the draft. They're scared of the draft because, to a large degree, many of their children have not been exposed to the outside world. And there is this fear that when they join the army and they become part of the army, their commitment, their observance will crumble. I understand it. Now they have Nachal Haredi. Nevertheless, some of these people, certainly among the women, it's that way. They almost never leave their, and obviously this is not true about everybody, they're a small circle. And now they're going away from their house and into a non-yeshiva environment. And they don't have that ability to overcome certain influences. Would it be better if they did have that ability? For other reasons also, it would be better. Because you can't always control your environment. But there's this unfortunate attitude that you can control which environment you're going to be. And then we have nothing to worry about. It comes, I think, that within a particular environment, they think that they are toshavim. They are residents. They have roots there. But they don't realize changing situations. So you have to prepare. But You have to deal with the situation the way it is, not the way it should be. And consequently, I understand the fear of the Haredi community. But what bothers me, and to me, I don't understand the justification, is their not wanting the meaning of soldiers. I've mentioned many times, somebody gives a donation to the yeshiva, to a yeshiva. They don't care what else he does. They don't care about his morality. They don't care about who he's married to, whether he's married to a Jew or a non-Jew. They don't care what he advocates. They don't care about his style of life. But he gives money. He sometimes will be a guest of honor of a yeshiva. I remember years ago, this is not now, when society has become so morally corrupt. There was a person who was intermarried. And there was the wife was Jewish and the husband wasn't Jewish. But because of his wife, he donated money to a certain yeshiva. And because he donated money, or maybe vice versa, he was the guest of honor at a certain yeshiva. I'm not even finding fault with the yeshiva. And then he got up to speak, and he says, do you know why I'm giving money? After all, I'm not Jewish. He said, because the Osha Ha'ish came from Jewish background, and his foundation is in the Torah that's being learned in this school. And this was a right-wing yeshiva. But if it had been a soldier in the Israeli army who gives his life for the Jewish people, even if he was observant, it should be true even if he's not observant, they would never have made him the guest of honor for giving his life. Chazal tell us that there are certain people that money is more important to them than life. Sometimes I sense that in the yeshiva's attitude, they have that attitude also. These people are giving their lives for you. I heard recently, somebody told me he met someone who davens in a yeshiva sheminyan. And sometimes, especially those who did not learn in yeshivas themselves, but join yeshiva sheminyanim, they repeat instead of thinking. And the same argument in other cases also I've heard from people who consider themselves liberals, and I see it at both ends of the spectrum. And they so this person who davens in yeshiva sheminyan, he said, you know why the war broke out? The war broke out because they wanted to draft the yeshiva boys. So the person said to him, what about the Holocaust? Why did that war break out? Why did that happen? Why were so many Jews killed then? What about in 1929? About Hebron, when the yeshiva boys were massacred? Was that also because there was no drafting of yeshiva boys at that time? Says, there are many things that we can't understand. That was the answer. So things that fit into their philosophy, they understand very simply. But things that negate what they're saying, it's a chok. We don't understand it. You know why they talk that way? Because they don't know what insecurity means. Their whole insecurity is maybe they will be drafted in the army. But the insecurity of the enemy that is attacking them, they don't understand. Why? Because there are soldiers that are protecting them. But they do not want to give the soldiers credit. Why don't they want to give the soldiers credit? They don't want to give the soldiers credit because they feel threatened that the soldiers will become heroes. And if the soldiers become heroes, hey, maybe one of their children who feels that he's not learning wise, that he wants to protect Jews, let's say. And sometimes these soldiers are dedicated to Torah with their whole lives. And they're wanting to join the armies because they consider it a mitzvah and because of their Abbas Yisrael. And sometimes it could be also because they see that after a number of years, they want to remain observant. They want to remain religious. They want to remain devoted to Torah. But somehow they're not having that much success in learning. And they might join the army. And they're scared of that. And they refuse to recognize what the soldiers are doing for them, risking their lives for them. And sometimes it hasn't happened in the middle of the war. When a soldier who is protecting them walks into their neighborhood, if he's a frum soldier, they actually attack him. Who gave them a heter for that? And then they speak in the name of Torah. So the problem is that they think that in their small knit community, they're secure. They observe the Chag Osef. They value the Chag Osef the same way that the Umos Olam valued the Chag Osef. They don't value. They're not able, they can't deal with the idea that we are insecure, because if they understood that they were insecure, they wouldn't have this attitude towards the soldiers, some who, by the way, are big B'nai Torah, devoted to learning, and have tremendous Ahavas Yisrael. Again, I'm not talking about drafting yeshiva boys, not drafting yeshiva boys. I'm talking about simple recognition of what happened. We just passed through Yom Kippur. And the first element of tshuva is hakaras hachet, to be makir something, reality. And a person could shut his eyes and he can make believe and he'll never do tshuva. But when we go from Yom Kippur to Sukkos, Sukkos emphasizing to the Sukkah, we have to make an evaluation, a true evaluation. What would happen if these soldiers weren't here? What would have happened if those people who came in October 7th went over all of Eretz Yisrael? What would have happened if they came from the north and from the south? What happened in Hebron in 1929? Where is the hakara? Recognition of your insecurity and recognition of who is giving you security. You have to be able to evaluate the situation. I remember I was talking to somebody, and simultaneously he said, "We don't need to serve in the army." This wasn't an Israeli, but he spoke like he was. He was associated with people on the right or whatever. He said, "We don't need to serve in the army. And besides, who gave them permission to give away parts of Eretz Yisrael?" I said, "Well, how would they?" And I'm against giving back territory, but he came from both sides here. First of all, we don't need to serve in the army. On the other hand, they shouldn't give away parts of Eretz Yisrael. So who is going to protect the Jews? They don't think because they don't want to think. They're blind because they want to be blind. No, I'm not saying that they shouldn't get deferments or whatever it is. We, as young students in yeshiva in the United States, we got deferments from going to the army. But recognize what the army is doing for you. Recognize what would have happened October 7th if they came in from the north and from the south. And then as late as the defense began, it did begin. And if it didn't begin, what would have happened to all the yeshiva boys? That we have to recognize our insecurity, and we have to recognize where our security comes from. Yes, someone here was on the left politically, left religiously. He said to me, all of a sudden, he's critical of everything on the right. And he said, but he's critical of those that support the right-wingers in the election. So I asked him, what about Israel? What about the situation in Israel? You criticize the yeshiva boys because they don't go into the army. What about this issue? Just HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of it. All of a sudden, the religious attitude, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of it. I said to him, same thing that fellow said to the other guy. What about Hebron? What about the Holocaust? Yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of everything. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to help us to take care. Recognize, if you are secure, it's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu helped the soldiers. And because the soldiers gave themselves over to defend you, to help you, and to save you. You know, I mention always there was such a unity when this war broke out. And that crumbled. It crumbled because of the Supreme Court. It crumbled, I think, also to a certain degree because I don't think that everybody gave the proper credit, the proper respect to the soldiers for giving their lives on their behalf. At least give them the credit. You're upset that that many don't recognize your contribution, and you're learning Torah, you're davening, you're doing mitzvahs, you're saying Tehillim. It does play a role. We can't deny that. But recognize what the soldiers are doing. Recognize that the soldiers are giving their lives for your security, as well as for their own. Recognize that there's some sense in them, even the non-observant ones, even the ones who are not learning Torah. They could easily take in a different path, but they all joined to save the Jewish people. And this is a message to the Jews of Chutz La'aretz also, because as we see, there are those that thought in the United States everything is good. We saw the impact. We saw the impact that the situation, what happens in the United States, it mirrors what happens in Eretz Yisrael. You see what's happening on the college campuses. And as I mentioned before, these students on the college campuses that are forgetting their friendship. I already heard from people, Jews who politically were left-wing, call me up. Not that this changed all their attitudes. Some of them it did. They don't know what happened. The people that were their best friends stopped talking to them. These people are not in a position of power. They're in a position of influence, especially election time. And especially when they have favored candidates who are appealing for their votes. But we have to recognize our insecurity. Don't think that because you're in the United States, we are secure. We all live in a sukkah. We have to recognize our insecurity. The sukkah is a booth, and it offers very little protection against the laws of nature. And that's even when there's four walls, especially a sukkah that has two walls and one tefach. What security does it offer? And at best, our lives can be compared to people who are in a sukkah of two walls and one tefach. I think that's the message of the holiday of Sukkos in our time, using my father's explanation. All right, I have another teretz, another explanation, but I think that, all right, I'll say it. I have another explanation about the two aspects of Sukkos. And it's an idea that I've mentioned before. Now, when we take a look, we have three holidays, one after the other. We have Rosh Hashanah, we have Yom Kippur, and we have Sukkos. And there's obviously a relationship between them. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we understand the relationship. But it's more difficult to understand the relationship between Sukkos on one hand and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim on the other hand. There's Midrashim that say it's a celebration, that we feel confident that the din went the right way. Now, I've mentioned very often, you take a look at the three Sfarim that was written in Tanakh, written by Shlomo Melech, Mishlei, Keheles, and Shir Hashirim. So in Keheles, Shlomo Melech identifies himself as Keheles ben David. In Mishlei, he identifies himself as Mishlei ben David. In Shir Hashirim, it's Shir Hashirim Shel Shlomo. David is not mentioned. Rashi already asked the question. I want to suggest another teretz. Now, Yaakov Avinu, who I mentioned already, is the symbol of Sukkos. When he stood at base camp, he said, "Im Yeh Elokim Amadi, if God will be with me, Ushmarani b'derech asher anochi holech, and he'll watch over me in the road that I'm going. V'nasan li lechem lechol, give me bread to eat, to beged lilbosh, and clothes to wear. B'shafti b'shoma beisavi. Now we return to my father's house in peace. V'hay Hashem li le'lekim. God will be for me a God. Yaakov Avinu, the Bechir Avos, the chosen one of the patriarchs. So he says, God, I'll make a deal with you. Can we imagine that? If you'll be good to me, I'll be good to you. Otherwise, forget it. Is it possible to believe such a thing? But we know in our davening and in those Yashir, we have a double relationship with God. On one hand, in those Yashir, we say, Zekeli Vanveyu. This is my God. And the Targumunkla says, and I will build for him a mikdash. He translates Anveyu as Nova, an Aramaic word, a residence. This is my God. Elakayavi Varomenu, the God of my ancestors, and I will exalt him. According to the Targum, I will serve him. We have a relationship, God, based on the personal relationship we have with God, on sensing the presence of God in our life. We have a relationship with God based on the seeing of God in the life of our ancestors. And in a sense, and this is in the personal relationship now, and that's what Yaakov Avinu was saying. So long as I was in the tent of my father Yitzchak, so Yitzchak religiously dominated the scene. So my main relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Elokei Avi, the God of my ancestors. But now that I was forced to leave my father's house, so I'm going to use the opportunity to strengthen my personal relationship with God. But in my personal relationship with God, I'm not going to need big miracles. I'm not going to need a Kriyas Yamsuf. But in the things that a person takes for granted, that a normal person takes for granted, I will strengthen my personal relationship with God. And the truth of the matter is, in a love relationship, doesn't manifest itself in the special presence that one spouse gives the other. But it's the day-to-day things that is the primary form of the strength of the personal relationship, of the love relationship that exists between spouses. And this is what Yaakov said, watch over me. Give me food to eat, things that people have every day, ubeged lilbosh, and clothes to wear. V'shafti b'sholem beisavi, and I'll return in peace to my father's house. V'hay Hashem li le'elokim. I will have a stronger personal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Keheles says, Sof davar hakol nishma es elokim yirei. The sum total of everything in Keheles is fear of God. Fear is something that's given over from father to son. It represents the relationship of Elokei Avi. Yaakov refers to God as Pachad Avi Yitzchak, the fear of my father Isaac. Mishlei ben David, Tochacha Musar, right? Divrei Mishlei ben David, the Rashi says that's Tochacha Musar. Ethics, chastising, all that. Shema b'ni Musar abicha. Pirkei Avos is called ethics in English, ethics of the fathers. That's given over from father to son, from Rabbi, from teacher to student, from parent to child. But Shir HaShirim is the love relationship. And the love relationship, that's the personal relationship. Zekeli van Vehu. And the Beis HaMikdash is the Va'asali Mikdash v'shachanti b'socham, that's making a residence for God in our midst. It represents the personal relationship, the love relationship that exists between God and the Jewish people. So Yaakov Avinu said, in the Oz Yashir, in the Oz Yashir, up till the point of the Kriyas Yamsuf, it was the Lekei Avram v'Yitzchak v'Yaakov, the God of their ancestors, that came to fulfill the commitment he made to them. But somehow at Kriyas Yamsuf, it was Zekeli Ban Vehu. They were able to establish a personal relationship. And indicative of that, they said they're going to make a Beis HaMikdash that represents that personal love relationship that they would have with God. And that's why Mikdash Hashem Konru Yadecha, at the end of the Shira, talks about Mikdash Hashem Konru Yadecha. Das Yashir concludes with the building of the temple of the Beis HaMikdash. And this also is, Yaakov said, but Evan Azal Sasher Samti Matseva, this stone that I made as a Matseva, when I strengthen this personal relationship to that, Yiyeh Beis Hashem will be a house of God. So will be a house of God, will be a mikdash, will be the mikdash. That's the special relationship. So I think this is the idea also. The sukkah. The sukkah is the sukkah was made leman yedu doroseichem ki basukkos v'shafti es b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim. The sukkah was made in order that we should remember what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for our ancestors. It's the Elokei Avi Baromemenu, but the Chag Asif, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we bring in the crop. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our life. And since it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our life, so that represents Zekeli Van Vehu. So now, Rosh Hashanah, we focus on the Avos. We talk about the Akedah. We talk about Sarah. The main focus is the Avos. Yom Kippur, it's also about the Avos. It's also about the Akedah. But when we say the Vidui, which is the main focus of the day, we're talking about our personal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We invoke the Avos, but Yom Kippurim emphasizes repairing our personal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sukkos combines Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. On one hand, it's dedicated to the personal relationship, as demonstrated by the Chag Asif, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us sustenance, takes care of our needs. On the other hand, it's Elokei Aviv Menhu. It's Elokei Aviv Menhu. It's the God of my ancestors, as demonstrated by the Sukkah. with the sukkah is L'man yedu dorosechem, your future generations should know what I did in the earlier generations. Ki basukos hashafti es b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. So Sukkot represents the combination of these two relationships as demonstrated by Rosh Hashanah and Yom HaKippur. Okay.
If anyone has any questions, please put it in the chat. Well, you said about at the beginning about insecurity. I think you've said other times about Esav, that Esav didn't want the Bechor. He wanted you didn't use this particular word, but the security of having Har Seir, getting his Yerusha right away.
I didn't saw so much of the security as representing the present for the present for the future in that case. The security of now as opposed to the security of the future. Do you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm saying a different way of future versus present is more security.
Yeah, I understand, but okay. There's a need for security in the future also.
Yeah.
That's the Bake Shalom, the Ratfeya.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I quoted the pasuk right because on the rush. Having a zosa shesamti matseva yia beisolakim. Okay.
Yeah, there aren't any
no questions. Okay.
So I don't think we'll be able to send an email before Yontif about share being next Sunday. But
okay.
Hopefully
Fine.
after Shabbos.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's for sure.
Well,
okay. I'll be in touch. I have to check about the